Welcome to our ADM Lucid Automation Testing channel. We'll have a series of talk about Selenium automation testing, which will help you understand the basics of Selenium and also guide you to build your own Selenium automation project. You may access our test project and guide in the description below. Feel free to subscribe to our channel for any new videos and updates. I hope you enjoy the video. In today's video, we will talk about this concept or this thing called Selenium Grid. So first, what is Selenium Grid? So Selenium Grid is a powerful tool for running Selenium tests in parallel on multiple different browsers and operating systems. It is a part of the Selenium suite and is designed to enable efficient and scalable testing of web applications across different environments. So next, I'll kind of cover some key aspects of Selenium Grid. So the first is that Selenium Grid allows parallel testing. So what does that mean? What it means is it allows you to distribute the test cases across multiple machines or nodes and run them in parallel. So this will reduce the runtime and make it much more efficient to run test automation. The next thing is Selenium Grid allows cross-browser testing. So with Selenium Grid, you can perform cross-browser testing by configuring the different nodes that we had to run on different web browsers such as Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or Internet Browser. And this will ensure that your web application works correctly across the different browser environments. The next thing is it allows cross-platform testing. And again, this is because you can configure the nodes to work on different operating systems. And this will help you identify platform-specific issues and ensure that the compatibility is right with various different operating systems. And also, it allows scalability. Selenium Grid is highly scalable. You can add, remove nodes dynamically as needed to accommodate changes in testing requirements or to handle increased testing loads. The scalability makes it suitable for small and large test suites. Configuration is also something about Selenium Grid. So nodes in Selenium Grid are configured with desired browser and platform settings. And these configurations you can customize depending on the needs for your testing. Also, remote WebDriver. So Selenium Grid uses the remote WebDriver API, and this allows test scripts to interact with browser instances running on remote machines. And so the test scripts can be written in various different languages like Java, Python, C#, and they can communicate with the hub to initiate tests on nodes. Another property of Selenium Grid is load balancing. So the hub can distribute test cases to nodes in a balanced way, ensuring that our testing workload is evenly distributed with all our resources, and this will further increase and optimize our testing. There's also hub and node registration, and basically nodes need to register with the hub to make themselves available for test execution, and this registration process involves specifying the node's capabilities such as its browser type, its version, and its platform. And there's also this hub node architecture in Selenium Grid. And basically, Selenium Grid consists of two main components. It's the hub and the nodes we mentioned. The hub is basically the central server that manages all the different test distributions to the different nodes. And the nodes are basically the individual machines that execute the Selenium tests. So test scripts that we write directly communicate with the hub, which then directs them to appropriate nodes based on the browser and platform configurations we need. So to look at this sort of architecture a little bit more, I'm going to open this link. And what they have is they have this sort of flow chart to describe this. And we see that basically as a client, when we send our requests for different tests to the router, it will create a session queue. And this session queue will basically first check if we already have a session with the same ID running, and if so, it'll send it directly to the node, and if not, it'll bring it to the distributor, and the distributor will then distribute our processes the node. Also, when we send our test scripts to the router, what also happens is that it will create a session map. And this will basically assign the different nodes and the different resources to this bank that will basically store it. So in the future, we can basically see. But yeah, so if you're interested in like the more detailed version of this, feel free to visit this website right here. It gives you a pretty good sort of overview of this Selenium Grid architecture. And also to download Selenium Grid, you can just go to their GitHub. And in our video today, we used the Selenium server 4.13.jar file. We just downloaded it and we put it into the folder that we needed. And to use Selenium Grid, basically what we did was we created a grid Java class under the controller packages, and then we imported of course we imported the package that we need to use, so the remote WebDriver API that we mentioned earlier. And then we also did this, and basically right here, we created an instance for the remote WebDriver, and then we basically set this new URL thing argument right here, which is very important. And if you wanted to start it as a standalone process, then you would use this command here. And this is for if you want to start a hub and node, you would use this command right here with the file downloaded from the GitHub. And this is for nodes. So the first one is for hub, the second one is for nodes. And this is basically specifying the port that you want the node to be on. Default is 5555. And yeah.
Next, we're going to use Selenium Grid inside our code. So we're just going to show you how we can do this and how we can use Selenium Grid inside our code. So first, I'm going to go to this grid class that I created under our controller package, and you can see it's right here. And we're going to have to first import two things. The first is the .url, and the second is the .remote WebDriver. And we talked about this earlier in our presentation. We have to import both of these in order to use the Selenium Grid. So next, inside this class, it's mostly similar to the class we used before with the Selenium expectation, but there are a few differences. So the first thing is we created this method called test grid. And inside this method, we have this remote URL, which is localhost 4444. And you'll see we use this remote URL later. After that, we have these basically these different statements. So first we create an instance for desired capabilities, and then we set the browser name to Chrome. We set the platform to Windows 11, and then we create an instance, a remote WebDriver instance with the remote URL and the capability instance that we created earlier. And you see that in this one specific little block of code here, we are using Chrome, and we're creating a Chrome web browser. But we also have it for Firefox, Edge, Firefox Mac, Firefox Linux, and so on. And we even have it for Safari as well. And below, we just have some implicit waits so that what we want happens, because we must wait for it to load for a bit before it happens. So this is our test grid method. Next, we have basically a page title URL method and some other methods as well, just to test the Selenium expected conditions. And in this URL, there are a few differences than before. If you don't remember what expected conditions are, I suggest you go back to our video about Selenium expected conditions and watch that again. But essentially, we have some different expected conditions, and we're just testing to see if the web page that we enter is getting the condition we get. And the key difference about this one is we're using this test grid browser, and this allows us to use Selenium Grid to perform these expected conditions instead. And you see in this one, we're testing adm.com-golf. And we have some different conditions for the title, for the URL, and so on. And so After we do that, before we want to use Selenium Grid, we must first we'll check that we have Java installed on our computer, so we can enter this java-version command. After we do that, we're gonna recall that we installed Selenium Server 4.13 earlier. So we're gonna actually run this using Java, and we're gonna use the command called standalone. And this basically means we're just running it on our computer. And we're gonna go ahead and run it, and basically it's gonna load, and it's gonna give you a bunch of output. But a few things to note in the output. See, it says detected 12 available processors, and basically there's some other commands in here. For example, it says added Edge 12 times, added Chrome 12 times, added Firefox 12 times, and Internet Explorer 1 time. And this will become a little bit more apparent later when we show you the graphical interface. But yeah, so you run this inside your command line, and now you can start using Selenium Grid. So we're gonna run that. And now what we can do is we can switch back to our IDE. And this time we're gonna go to our test package instead. And under our test package, we have a few different tests. We have app test Grid for Chrome, Grid for Edge, and Grid for Firefox. I'm just gonna open Grid for Chrome, and this is what it looks like inside. It's basically essentially the same thing. We just call upon the conditions. We call upon the methods inside the Grid class, and we see if it runs. So in order to run this, I'm just going to right-click the whole package folder, tests, and I'm just going to run test and tests. So it pops up this window because we're testing admlucid.com-golf in this method. And it's just a bunch of tests. And you see it open the Chrome browser, and it's opening another Chrome browser, and it's opening Chrome browsers multiple times. It opened Firefox. It also opened Edge. And yeah, so it's opened all those browsers, and it just finished running. So there's actually a GUI interface that we can look at to monitor our tests while it's running. So we're going to open this Firefox browser, and yeah, just drag it over. And this is what the Selenium Grid interface looks like. And you see that the URL on top is localhost 444. I'm just going to go ahead and go to overview, and we see here, this is the 12 Chrome that we're talking about earlier, the 12 Firefox, 1 Internet Explorer, and 12 Edge that we mentioned earlier when we used the standalone command in our terminal. And yeah, it gives you some other commands like map concurrency, some other configurations and stuff. But yeah, I'm going to close that. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to run this again so I can show you what it looks like here. And you see when we it pops up over it, but I'm just going to go back, and I'm going to show you here. It shows you your session info, and it'll show you how it's running and stuff. And this is a nice little graphical interface you can use to monitor your Selenium Grid while it's running. And we'll give it some time to run. And I think it finished running. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and check. And yeah, it's all done. And yeah, that's basically using Selenium Grid with the standalone command. So next, I'm going to show you how we can utilize the hub and the node architecture in Selenium Grid. Because earlier we used the standalone command, and that was basically just running in your local computer. But now what we want to do is we want to use the architecture we mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint. So first, you go back here, you go back to your terminal, and you're going to open, you're going to use the hub command instead. Earlier we used standalone, this time you use hub. And basically this will create a hub to control all your nodes. And you see on the bottom line, it says started Selenium hub 4.13. And that command basically says we started the hub. So now to add nodes, we're gonna open another terminal. Make sure you don't close the earlier terminal. And this time, the command we're gonna use is we're gonna use the same thing, except we're gonna use the node argument. And see here, we use node, and it's gonna run, and it's gonna say node has been added on the bottom. And if we go back to our local host 4444, which is basically the URL we defined earlier, you can see we have this one node here. Now I'm going to open another terminal. So I'm going to open another terminal and I'm going to add another node. So we're going to basically use the same command with node. I'm going to press enter. Or actually, remember, the default node has port 5555. So this time I'm going to use port 6666. And I think I made a mistake with the argument. So I'm going to re-enter. You have to have 2 dashes for the port. I only had 1 dash. So 2 dashes, 6666. And I'm going to add a node. And it'll basically say node has been added. Nice. And now the node has been added. So you see in our interface, graphical interface, we have 2 nodes. So I'm going to add one more node. So I'm going to open another terminal. And this time I'm going to use port 7777. And I'm going to run that. And now we have added the node on the bottom because it says node has been added. Or I drag it up. Yeah, no, node has been added. And so we added 3 nodes. So now we can go back to the GUI interface and we see that we have 3 nodes now. So now if I go back to our code and I go back to our test and I run the test, we'll see we will expect it to use all 3 nodes. So we open up the graphical interface. We see that it uses the first node to run that part of the test. And then it uses a second node to run another part of the test. And then finally, it will use the third node to run another part of the test. And so it's basically alternating between the nodes to run portions of the test. And once the test nodes are done running, once the tests are finished, I think the tests have now finished. So I'm going to go back to the IDE. And so the test finished and we alternated between the different nodes to finish the test. But sometimes we want to run it in parallel so that we can use all our resources more efficiently. So for instance, if we want to run on all 3 nodes at the same time, in order to do that, you have to first install a plugin. So you go to settings and then you go plugins, and then you're going to install multi-run plugin. So I already have it installed, but you can go ahead and install that, and then you can just press OK on the bottom. And after you install that, now you have to create your test classes a little bit differently according to the syntax requirements for multi-run. So right here, I have a YouTube package, and under it, I have YouTube Chrome, YouTube Edge, and YouTube Firefox. I'm just going to open one of them. So right here, I have YouTube Chrome open, and we see here, first, we have to import some different packages. So for .test package, also a .execution package, also a .execution mode package as well. And then on the top, we use a tag @execution and execution mode concurrent. And that's very important. And each time we try to run a method within the classes that we want to have that has the methods to test stuff, we use an @test tag before the method. And this will basically allow us to use multi-run and use the nodes concurrently. I'm just going to show you the YouTube one we used instead. This is essentially the same stuff, except this one is basically testing a different browser, a different URL, and we're just testing a YouTube channel. So we're just opening our YouTube channel and then we're keeping it in the background. And you see that we basically have the same stuff. We have a test grid method to define the test grid and use remote driver. And then we have these tests, which basically open up this YouTube channel, and then we wait for 120 seconds. We let it run for 120 seconds and see if it works, and then we quit. So this is basically the class that we have, the controller class for YouTube. And so it's up here. And now if we want to run these tests, we actually have to do something a little bit different. So we actually have to go to run, and then we actually have to go to edit configurations. And before we were using JUnit when we were running it alternately through the different nodes. This time we have to go to the bottom. So you see on the bottom, there's multi-run. I'm going to click it, and you can actually add your new configuration. I already have a configuration here called parallel test, but if you go back, you can add new configuration there. And here under this, I added the 3 different classes that I want to run with. And I have YouTube Chrome, YouTube Edge, and YouTube Firefox, and I can go ahead and press OK. And now when I click run on the top, I can select run parallel tests, which is the configuration I just mentioned earlier and I just created. So I click that, and now it should use all nodes concurrently. So it opens up, so we opened up Chrome one on our YouTube page, opened up a Edge browser on our YouTube page. And if I go to our GUI interface, you see it's using the second and third node at the same time, and it's running it in parallel. And you see we have multiple sessions running at the same time. And this is basically using the Selenium Grid architecture. And yeah, so this is basically how you can implement and use Selenium Grid in your own code. If you found this video helpful, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for any new videos. Thank you for listening.